When Talia reached out, I said, "You had me at behavior bitches." I was like, "I don't know what you do, but I'm in. Whatever this is definitely my people."
It's behavior bitches.
Hey guys, it's Liat and Talia. I'll let you know who that is in a second. And we are here today with a very special Behavior Bitches episode. Before we get into today's episode, I always like to start off with some reinforcement, which, by the way, keep sending it in. It keeps me going. That's what reinforcement does. Literally, that's what it means. So today we have a review from Catherine Mitch Vetch. And she wrote in, and she actually wrote in from Spotify. So, by the way, if you have Spotify, you could still leave us some nice things to say. This was on the most recent episode we did with Parisa Shifta from The Bachelor, who was on our episode. She said, "Love this episode. So cool seeing ABA strategies being used in a reality TV show. Definitely helps with examples of strategies in the real world while studying." Well, that's amazing, Catherine. That's exactly why we do it, so that you realize behavior is everywhere, which actually leads perfectly into our podcast today, because you're going to see people across different spaces are really speaking the same language, even if it seems like we are doing completely different things. So with that, there's just so much excitement in here. If you guys could feel the excitement next to me, you can't. But if you're watching the video, like I've asked you guys to do on YouTube, you would know that there's a lot of excitement going on. And I'm going to introduce you to our guest. First, I'm going to introduce you to who is going to be leading the show with me today. It is someone very special to me and someone who people think sounds like me as well. And this person is none other than my sister, Talia. Welcome, sis.
Thanks, sis.
She was on episode maybe like
literally
two
before
of
you
the
had
show?
any listeners. We were talking about marketing as a behavior game.
I
That
think
was like
I li-
episode 3.
Episode 3. That was a couple million downloads ago. Thanks for coming on, sis, and I'm welcoming you back. It's pretty exciting actually seeing where we started to where we are now, like getting people as big as today's guest on, which we are super excited about. Let me tell you about our guest today. We have Alison Fragale. She is an organizational psychologist, professor at the University of North Carolina Business School, and best-selling author of Likeable Badass: How Women Get the Success They Deserve. Cue in, ladies. Her academic research on status, power, negotiation, and influence have been published in her field's top academic journals, as well as national media outlets, including the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. She is a sought-after keynote speaker who uses behavioral science to help individuals, especially women, excel. Prior to her academic career, Alison worked as a consultant for McKinsey & Company. She holds a BA in mathematics and economics from Dartmouth. Wow, math, that's impressive. And a PhD in organizational behavior from the Stanford University Graduate School of Business. She is impressive AF. Alison resides in Chicago with her husband and her 3 children, who are all named after professional athletes.
We need to hear their names later.
So is mine, actually.
Kobe. Yeah, you're right.
She also loves, in no particular order, cheap coffee. I want to ask you about this. Not so cheap wine, fabulous shoes, sushi, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Hey, AJ. We have someone behind the camera over here who also loves the Steelers. Oh, and Alan, our producer, who's on with us. Alan, woo. Peloton workouts. You and my sis have that in common. Hallmark movies. And the Golden Girls. Alison, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited, as you know, to be here.
I don't know if you're more excited than my sister. I'll tell you that. My sister has been like queuing up for this day. Just a little intro. My sister read your book.
Yeah.
How did you find out about this book?
George Felix, who we're going to give him a shout out at the end of this episode, but I was doing some work for Brinker, which owns Chili's and Maggiano's, and George and I became close. And he was like, "This book, Likeable Badass, like one of my professors from business school wrote it. You should check it out." Within like 24 hours, I downloaded it, listened to it while running on the Peloton, learned while running on the Peloton that you also love Peloton, and then felt like me and Alison were just best friends. And then sent a cold email to her and was like, "Can I interview on a podcast?" And she said yes.
And somewhere in between there, you bought the hard copy also. Then you gave it to me and was like, "You need to read this over Shabbat.
You have to read this over Shabbat. You have to finish this." Yeah. So we've got our hard copy with all of our notes and highlights. But yes, it's just, I think it's like, as someone, I mean, my sister has not necessarily been in corporate America. We always joke about that. Like, she doesn't necessarily play by any of these rules. She doesn't even know about the norms that exist. But as someone that has definitely been in corporate America my entire career, there are absolutely these unsaid norms and like hacks that you can leverage to like advance yourself and increase influence. And I think that having them all codified in such an easy and accessible way is just mind blowing for me. And then I also, as a marketer, the fact that you have a book name that is just so sticky. I've been advising some other authors on book names that are like just way too long. And I'm like, no one's going to actually, like, you want it to become a term that people like really pick up and play out. And the likable badass term is just, it's so telegraphic. People get it immediately. And I think that also really works. So everything about this is a masterclass. And that's why I'm just so happy to have you here.
You're the best.
No, and coming from her, that means a lot. She loves complaining about everything she sees.
Yeah, I'm always optimizing everything I see. Nothing's ever good enough, but this is great, and there's no notes. No notes. So I think before we got started, obviously there's a lot we want to ask you about your expertise. There's so much to dig in there. But I think as our audience just gets to know you a little bit, and playing on the topic of your book, Likeable, we wanted to understand what you like. We want to get to know you a little bit. So we are going to do what you would call in your field a preference assessment, sis, when you're kind of pairing with someone. So as we pair with you and get to know you a little better and build rapport with you, we want to know what you like. So this is just going to be some rapid fire. Are you an early morning power hour or a late night grinder?
Oh, early morning power hour.
Same.
100%.
Oh my God.
Okay. Power heels or sneakers?
Sneakers now.
What kind?
Power heel.
What was your most recent purchase of sneakers?
A pair of Valentino silver sneakers.
Oh, I wasn't expecting to go that highbrow, but I like it. I like your style. As you
That
should.
was my most recent pair, to be fair. But the pair before that was some golden goose.
Golden goose. Okay, I need to look at these Valentino sneakers. No wonder you noticed my shoes in that picture I sent you a while ago. I know you said you're a shoe person. Okay, this is another great way to categorize someone. To judge someone. Text or voice note? Like, right? Like, don't send me a podcast. Like, I can just text. Okay, good. Just
Voice
I
notes?
will voice to text. I will use the voice to
absolutely.
text, right? But it sends as a text. When I have to listen to it, I'm all confused. And then I feel like it's Mission Impossible. Does the message self-destruct? Like, what happened? You hold it up to your ear and then it's gone?
Yes.
And if you miss it, I can't. I'm too old for that.
Okay, we just wanted to make sure that was a way for us to kind of just do another.
Okay, this next one's weird. I think my sister wrote this one.
I did write this one. Okay. Would you rather present, this is so weird. This is me. Would you rather present on stage with spinach in your teeth or a stain on your pants?
I'm going to go. Oh, this is hard.
Like, where's the stain? Where's the stain?
I think I'm going to go spinach in my teeth. And the only reason I say that is because a lot of times, because I'm not a great smiler, I'm a bit of a closed mouth talker. I'm not a big teeth shower. So I think even with spinach, I might, and I'm a fast talker. So
and you might be able to get away with it more.
Could get away with it, I think, right? That's my thought. But if I have stain on my pants, I could just stand behind the podium.
See, this is where you get to understand the logic. So maybe she'd choose based on the context.
I would take a stain any day.
I know. I thought
as someone who always has something stuck in my teeth, even
you
water,
do always have stuff in your teeth.
Thanks.
Always.
Yeah.
Like you have lipstick on them right now.
Do I?
I'm just kidding. No, but okay, this is a good one because I feel like we also like as like people who like we love our jobs and we also like being a working mom when you're so invested in your job and like kids.
To say we love our jobs and we love our
kids. But like they're at odds with each other sometimes. But anyway, I want to understand this about you. Me and my sister immediately knew our answer. Would you rather have a week with your kids at home with COVID or a 24-hour flight with your kids with no screens?
24-hour flight with my kids with no screens.
Oh, we took COVID because we were like, you can put the kids in the room with screens. Okay.
I only say this. Now, keep in mind, I say this because I just got back from a 24-hour flight with my kids.
That's why I thought it would be top of mind for you. But are they older? What age are they again?
Yeah, they're older. So they go from 10 to 16. So
okay, fair.
It's a little different.
We should have said toddlers.
Yeah, I mean, I could actually, now that I say that, I think you're convinced because if they were home with COVID, they're older, they wouldn't even talk to me. I could reorganize a lot of closets.
Yes.
So I think retract my answer. I'll go COVID.
You'd rather your
at
kids get
home
COVID.
because
Fair.
so,
Agreed. We're
yeah,
all
because then I
aligned.
would get a lot done. I'd get a lot done. Yeah. So
Yeah.
never mind.
Okay, cool. We thought that we were just immediately like
Glad,
COVID.
glad we're on the same page there.
There you go.
Okay.
Wait, where were you traveling for 24 hours?
To Thailand. She literally was at the White Lotus
Thailand.
Resort.
Is it an actual resort?
Yes, it's a Four Seasons.
It's not a resort, but they filmed it at a Four Seasons
Yes.
in
I was
Thailand,
like, wait, is
most
that the
recent
actual name
season.
of the resort?
No.
It's the Four Seasons.
No.
They film at Four Seasons. So it's funny. I was actually at the White Lotus or the Four Seasons Hawaii where that season was shot.
Yeah.
But it's so
I've been
cool
there,
to
yeah.
like see the different, like it is cool to see it on camera and be like, I ate there. Or like this season, we have to talk about it at some point. It was incredible. I really loved it.
I'm glad it's over. It's so stressful.
It was stressful. Last night I was like anxious. Like midway, I had Jay go and get me like a snack. I was like, and I don't usually eat
Yeah.
when I'm nervous. But anyway, I was nervous last night. Okay, 4 more. We both love Peloton. Who is your favorite instructor?
Okay. For cycling, I'm going to go Dennis Morton, and for running, Bex Gentry. But I have a couple like that's 1 and 1. But I have like a top 3 in each set.
Okay, I need to talk to you more
Olivia?
about running. My husband only likes Olivia. I'm like, it's like to the point that I'm like, I think it's just because you like how she looks. I mean, her classes
duh.
are great. She is gorgeous.
I do love Olivia. She's in my top 3 on both sides.
And she has great
running.
music. And I love Jess Sims for running. And also, have you done Lane Break yet?
No.
You got to do Lane Break. I listen to podcast while on 1.5 while running Lane Break. So I feel super productive. And it's like a video game where you're like running through tunnels. Super cool. And it goes by really fast. Okay. What time do you like to wake up?
4:30
a.m.?
Mm-hmm.
What time do you like to go to bed?
8 p.m.
Whoa. Okay. That's your chronotype. I guess if that works for you, that's great. 8
Yeah,
to
like
4.
if my family were out of town and I were at home and I had no plans, that's when I would fall asleep by 8:00 and I'd be up at 4:30, and like by 6 a.m. I would have like worked out and
I know. It feels
done all
really
the
good to beat the
things and-
day.
Yeah.
I aspire to that one day. Okay, we're going to try that if my kids would sleep through the night.
I agree.
And then I guess the last one is this kind of this kind of segues into your ideal day. What would that look like? Maybe waking up at 4:30, getting a Peloton in.
So my ideal day, part of my problem is I can my only good hours are the morning, and I'm like, okay, how do I fit 24 hours of life into the morning? Because then I just start to fade. My ideal day is I wake up, I will drink a full bottle of water before I have my coffee, but that doesn't always happen. Sometimes I go straight for the coffee, and then perfect world cardio in the morning, and then start my workday. That's my perfect
day. Okay,
Oh,
I
and
like it.
I will say when I'm in town, I like to read. So if I get up really early, I can have coffee, read by my little fake gas fireplace for a while, then do my workout and still be done before
Oh,
everyone's
that's
up and
amazing. Yes.
Yeah.
I say my
Wow.
2 hobbies are reading and running. We have that in common. My husband was just
Yeah.
in like this like high stakes interview where they were asking him his hobbies. He was like not expecting them to ask him that. He's like, "Fuck, I don't have any hobbies." And I was like,
Dude, try being in the dating world. That's literally like, oh, so what do you like to do in your spare time?
and you're like, "I work."
I'm like,
I work, I read or run and work, and keep my kids alive. Okay, so thank you, Allison, for helping us get to know you a little bit. That was super fun.
but
We
I
wanted
had
to-
one last question that you didn't get to.
What?
In her intro, it says she likes cheap coffee. What do you mean by this?
Like Folgers?
Sure. What I mean is I'm not a discriminating coffee consumer. I love coffee the second my eyes open. It's all I think about. Okay. If I'm in a hotel and I wake up at 4:30 in the morning and there's nowhere to get coffee and there's that grungy little sad machine there that like doesn't feel safe to use or anything like that, it makes me really sad. So I love coffee, but I don't care where it comes from. So people who are like, "Oh, I like this bean and this roast and this thing." I'll drink any of that. I'm not against a fancy coffee, but I'm equally happy with coffee from the gas station, coffee from, McDonald's. I used a Keurig for the longest time where beans that were ground 10 years ago and put in a plastic cup, fine by me. I don't do that anymore because it broke and I did upgrade myself to this fancy Jura thing, but I'm just not discriminating. Like I like coffee, but I'll take it from anywhere.
That's fair.
you won't.
Yeah.
I mean, I prefer Starbucks, yeah. But I do need coffee. Like it's what starts my day. I look forward to waking up for coffee. Like I wake up for coffee, I think.
I like buy a
Yeah.
coffee to waste it.
Yeah, you say take 2 sips because you think it looks cute. Okay, so Alison, thank you so much for that background on you, getting to know you a little bit better as a person and not just like a PhD badass, which we will now start to segue into to understand your expertise and really where you are going to help our audience understand.
We always like to operationally define things in the space of behavior. So, can you operationally define what is a likable badass?
I can. I got to define one other thing for you first. So we're going to take one step back and I'm going to define status. This is what is your status. When I refer to your status, I'm referring to how much you are respected and highly regarded by other people who know you or know you exist. So that is something that's really critical to our happiness, our ability to navigate our life the way we want, if we're working, our career success, our life satisfaction. All these good things come from you having the respect of people around you. All right. Likeable badass relates to where status comes from. So, all day every day you're perceiving other people. You see people on the street, you work with them, you see somebody online on a TV show, whatever it is. And your brain is just drawing conclusions about that person all the time. And as you're doing that, other people's brains are drawing conclusions about you. Who are you? Well, the conclusions we draw about people are not random. We're always paying attention to the same two things. And that relates to likable badass. So the two things we're paying attention to is, do I think this person I'm looking at, does that person care about people other than themselves? Are they going to be helpful and generous and sincere and honest? Are they going to make my life better if I were to know them or interact with them? And we value that. We want to be around people who are likable and warm and friendly and helpful. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is, could I rely on that person? If I gave them a task, if I were dependent on them, would they be able to execute it well? So I always say no one wants to be the flaky friend. The person who's a fully grown adult, who's very sweet and everyone loves them and they've known them for a really long time, but no one's going to give them anything to do that really matters. The kind of person that when you invite them to a party and they say, "What can I bring?" and you're like, "You can bring ice
Yeah.
or napkin, something I don't actually need." It's like 50-50 what time if you're going to come at all, and if you're going to be late, if you're going to remember the thing. So I can't give you the thing. So that's the other dimension we care about is I can rely on you. And we respect that too. So when we think about people who have our respect, they are going to be people that we think are other oriented, care about, they're not selfish jerks. They care about people other than themselves and they're good at something. So that's what likable badass is, my catchy reference to those underlying two dimensions, which are about how we perceive other people in psychology. Because I know you have a psyche audience here. That's called the interpersonal circumflex of person perception, which we can all agree would be a really shitty title for a book. But it's referencing the two dimensions we pay attention to in other people. And so in order to get someone's respect, if a person believes that you're caring and you're capable, then respect follows. And so it's my guidance, my recipe for how can people control something that feels out of your control, another person's judgment of you. And you can't control it, but you can influence it. And the way we influence it is by showing up to them as likable and badass as we can. That's the greatest likelihood we have that we're going to get their brain to say, okay, you're really caring, you're really capable, I respect you.
I love that.
What credentializes you or makes you qualified to teach us about this?
What does make me qualified to teach you about this? So this is my academic space. So, yeah. So I spent 5 years getting my PhD in organizational behavior, organizational psychology, so studying human beings in topics that relate to the workplace. So things that will come up. So status, being respected, obviously it matters in life, but it certainly matters in a work context. And then I spent those 21 years I've been a professor, all of them studying status as an academic. And then I think the other piece of it is I wrote the book for women, and that's where I blended my own lived experience having to actually use this stuff that I studied to try to navigate my own professional life and to advise other women on how to do that as well, to take that science and say, all right, well, how can you use that in a way that you show up to get the results you want to live the life you want to live?
I have a question. So you have all the academic background. What do you think has been more beneficial in you really learning about what it takes to be a likable badass? Your personal experience or the academic background?
I can't pick one for you because to me, it's putting the two together. I think what helps me and what helps me help people is I have a very deep knowledge of the science and then a lot of experience using that science in my own life to say, here are the findings that I think are really impactful and here's how I've put them into practice. So I think if I only had one or the other, both of them would fall really flat for me trying to do what I'm doing.
So you could implement it in your real life and test it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and I think that's what people resonate with the book. When I get people who don't know me, right? Like Talia saying, I read the book. Everyone always says the same thing. Oh, it was really practical. And you explained the why behind telling me to do those things. So now
Mm-hmm.
I get it. And that comes from both of those places.
But they say like the best teachers can actually translate it to something that is accessible, because you can read these other books about the circumplex or the whatever you just said, or you can throw out mere exposure effect but not really help someone understand how they can leverage that by putting their name on a slide footer or whatever it is. I think it was like you really taking that and making it tangible. The tools of influence, and some of the ones that I know stood out to me and that I think maybe having you expand on that could be really applicable for the audience. I have a couple of them here, but and then we'd love to get into any that you feel like we haven't touched on. I know in the book you mentioned kind of the small deposits and how that kind of plays into the reciprocity effect. Can you explain kind of what that is and then maybe what a technique is to employ that tactic?
Absolutely. So reciprocity, right? Tit for tat. I do for you, you do for me. So you walk into a building, you hold the first door open for a stranger, and there's a double door. That stranger is always going to stop and hold the next door open for you, right? Because you did the thing. And you smile at someone, they smile back. You snap at someone, they're going to snap back. So we tend to reciprocate the behaviors in interactions. Small deposit is basically the value of being a first mover. So when you get marketing materials in the mail and they might have address labels in them or like a nickel taped to it and you get that stuff, you're like, why is this in here? That's the idea of a small deposit. You didn't ask for address labels. You don't really care about the nickel, but you can't give them back. There's no mechanism to say, never mind. You've taken them and it can spur a feeling of reciprocity, not with everybody, but the reason they do those things is because there's good science that says those little gifts given, some people will throw them away, but you'll get more reciprocity with them than without them. So that's small deposit is taking that idea outside the marketing realm specifically to think about building your own relationships to say, if I do something for you, no strings attached, you're likely to be pulled to reciprocate. But if I'm gonna do that for a lot of people, I'm busy and I don't wanna get burned. I mean, I can't be giving everybody a metaphorical $1,000,000. There's just no, resources for that. What are things I can give that are easy, like a dollar, like address labels, like a nickel, that if I don't get anything back from it, no big deal. But a lot of times I'll get reciprocity. So an example that I give, you mentioned Starbucks. Okay, I love Starbucks too. You go meet somebody for coffee and you're going to say, I don't, we meet for the first time, and it's very common for both parties to offer to pick up the bill because it's not enough money to be worth splitting the thing at the
I mean,
cash
it's
register. Like,
getting
I'll get
there.
it. No,
It's
yeah,
getting there.
right. Well, fair, fair. Depends on what you order. I always feel embarrassed when someone takes me for coffee because they'll be like, I'll have like a black coffee, plain. And I'm like, oh, I would like a grande blonde oat milk latte extra hot, please, and my $7 coffee and their dollar coffee. But it is what it is. I'll drink cheap beans, but I am an expensive coffee date in that regard. But my point is, you both offer. And what's the psychology of doing that? Why are you offering? Because it's a nice thing to do. And you want them to see you as a nice person. You don't want them to see you as a selfish person. So you offer to buy their coffee. Fine. The only downside of that is it doesn't give you anything on that other dimension. It's easy, it's quick, it's a small deposit, but you don't show up as really badass or capable because anyone in line could have probably bought that coffee. So an example would be you meet the new person, whoever buys the coffee, doesn't matter. You have the conversation. And as you're listening to that person, and Talia, we had this when we met, as I was hearing about like who you were for the first time when we met, it happened to be the case that right before you, I had been on a Zoom meeting with another new person that I had met that you guys were in the same space. And so I said to both of you afterward, you want to be introduced? And yes, you were. And it turns out, I guess there was a there, and you
Yeah.
guys actually worked together. But that comes from listening to someone's story and saying, who are you? What do you care about? And then My small deposit is, who do I know that you don't yet know that you could benefit from meeting and would also benefit from meeting you? So now, instead of just buying coffee or instead of buying coffee, I am really, my small deposit that I like to make is making intros. Every time I meet a new person, I think, how can I connect them with somebody else? And the value of that to me is it's really easy for me to do. It's one email that says, person A, meet person B, you're amazing, I'll get out of the way. And my work is done. So I could do that 100 times a day. But it also has the advantage of not only being generous, which is important, it has the advantage of distinguishing me as a person who knows people, which is a form of my capability. So you don't have to introduce people, but to think about things that are easy for you to do that you can be giving to lots of different people if they never nothing comes of it, no big deal, but allows you to show up as both caring and capable. And that's the thing that I'm looking for with small deposits. I always tell somebody, like, start with what you love, what you already do, and think about a way you could share that with other people.
I love that. It's like it's like a small, like, I'm connected, but I'm also
It's a
helping you.
win-win because it reflects well on you that you're connected and you know people that would benefit from meeting each other, to your point. So it reflects positively on you, but it also benefits the people in your circle. So I think the win-win is perfect there.
And it also allows you, it gives you a reason to show up for that other person when you're going to make the intro. So it's a good way to keep you top of
Yes.
mind with other people, to say, oh, by the way, I just met someone. I know, would you mind if I introed you? And someone I wouldn't have talked to in 6 months and didn't necessarily have a reason to talk to today, I do, because I'm going to make the intro. So to me, an intro is just one of the best examples of a small deposit, because literally anyone can do it. I tell this story a lot in some talks I've been giving recently, that was introduced to a woman who's a speaker, and we've developed a great relationship. But the person who introduced us is my 15-year-old son, where he went to a camp last summer and she was a speaker. And he said, Mom, she reminds me a lot of what you do. Could I introduce you? And I was like, sure. So he did. He wrote my name down and stuff on a piece of paper and took it to her. And she said at first she thought she was in trouble. Like, she had said something offensive and she was asked to, like, speak to his mother. And then she realized no. And she said, in all my years of doing this, she said, I didn't know who you were, what you did, but I've never had a teenage boy ask me to meet his mom. So I figured I just had to roll with it. So I agreed to meet you. And then we found out we had a lot in common. But the point of that is, if a 15-year-old can open their eyes and say, I know you, I know you don't even have to know them that well. You just have to say, hey, I think you guys would benefit. One email later, I'm like, if he can do it, anybody
Anyone
can be
can.
thinking about it. Anyone, you just have to think about the world that way. Yeah.
I agree. And being like, some people are just more hardwired to be a dot connector. Like, I feel like I see myself that way. Like, I'm constantly like seeing the dots and seeing the synergies that I think I can make through connecting people. It's funny. I was just on a podcast recently.
Our dad is literally,
I mean, dad is like the master. Yeah.
but like with zero context, like,
yeah,
it will be like,
I'm throwing on a
Liat,
text
Ava, bye.
Meet each other at coffee. Bye. It's like, is this person
like, are they a babysitter for my child? Are they like gonna like be the new
executive that I should work
CEO?
with?
Yeah,
Yeah, we
like,
don't know.
it gives us zero context.
It's behavior bitches.
Hey Behavior Bitches listeners, I just wanted to remind you, in case you're looking at how to study for the BCBA or BCABA exam, at Study Notes ABA, we have the entire collective to help you pass the freaking test. If you like what you hear here over on Behavior Bitches, trust me, it's better at Study Notes ABA. We take you from start point to end point of everything you need to know for the test. We take the notes with you over 12 weeks. We also have video bundles if that doesn't work for you. Our next collective is starting July 7th. Now, if you're watching this later on and this is no longer relevant with July 7th, we are always starting new collectives. And now you might notice that we have some new names, because all of our collectives include the pairing pack and the ultimate collective notebook. All things to make your note-taking and studying fun. Head on over to studynotesaba.com and we have it all there waiting for you to pass the freaking test. All of our collective packages have had a glow up, as you may notice. They have more mocks in them, more content, more activities, all things you're gonna want. And now you can get $50 off if you use coupon code BITCHES. That's BITCHES. Head on over to studynotesaba.com. It's time to pass the effing test.
It's funny because the small deposits thing, something that I started very early on in my career. Now I'm realizing that there's a term for it. I love when like you realize that there are certain behaviors that we innately have been exhibiting, but now I understand like the concept behind it. Ever since I started my career like 14 years ago, anytime I find out someone's birthday, I put it in my phone and I put a repeat. And
Totally.
I have
Same, friend.
and it's so interesting because it is naturally a time when people are more introspective and they appreciate hearing from you, because we're all doing an audit of the people that are that we've made enough impact on that they feel like they should remember our birthday. So, and it's funny whether it's like, my first boss, I get at least once a year, I get to touch base with Tom Carr, who has gone from being the CMO of Discovery Channel. Now he's at Chicken Salad Chick, and him and I are actually doing a project together in a few months. Or Cindy Gustafson from Weight Watchers, who was my CMO, and now she's the CEO of Nutrafol Hair. And so keeping in touch with these people, and just I think it's just a really interesting way that you can. I even have people's kids' birthdays. Like I'll just whenever you hear a birthday,
that's the ultimate move.
But because people know, and so I think it's like, to me, that is the smallest deposit for me to add it onto my iPhone, put a annual recurrence on it. And so I think it's just a really great way that you inevitably have once a year that you keep in touch, or warm touch with people on a day that they are much more receptive and more appreciative. So now I realize that was small deposits. So thank you for that language.
100%. And I do the same. And now I feel like I could up my game in terms of doing it with my professional context more.
Yes, totally.
Smart.
I love that. And I'm actually going to give a behavioral term for this for anyone studying for the exam. This is actually a fixed time schedule. It is not contingent on anyone engaging in a specific behavior, like an interval schedule. An interval schedule means if it was a fixed time 1 year, right, that would mean that 1 year has to pass and then someone engages in whatever behavior, and then you maybe, like, after a year passes, you see them post something on LinkedIn, you're going to comment. This is just straight up non-contingent reinforcement, right? Reaching out to them, giving that positive reinforcement, whatever it is. And it's just a great way, first of all, to create that connection. And again, non-contingent reinforcement goes far.
My next tool of influence, thanks sis for breaking it down for your behavior listeners, is mere exposure effect. I love this one. Despacito is another great way that Alison kind of brought this kind of terminology to life in her book. But if you could just help us understand what the heck mere exposure effect is and how one might leverage that to improve their status.
Okay. So mere exposure means familiar things are liked more. One of the easiest ways is think about a song on the radio, like Despacito. That may or not be anyone's favorite song now, but everybody has a favorite song or a song they really like at this moment where it comes on the radio. You're excited. You like that song now more than the first time you heard it. Why? Because you've been repeatedly exposed to it and it becomes familiar. Or if you've ever watching them, like you're like tired and you want to put on some TV and you're like, I don't want to watch anything new. I just want to watch something I've seen before because it feels familiar and comforting in that way. So when something becomes more familiar, we like it more. So out of sight, out of mind is true. Absence makes the heart grow fonder is not. So Despacito was my reference in the book to this time when Despacito became the most downloaded song on Spotify at its time, more than anyone else, until it was eclipsed by Baby Shark. But it was repeatedly played, and that's what got people to like it. And then eventually you can get sick of it. But what does that have to do with us, human beings, status, all those things? Is that one, the more we become familiar to people, the more they like us. When you've had that feeling of, I've heard of that person. I don't exactly even know where I've heard of them, but there is an affiliation, a liking that comes from that. And so thinking about how you can get your name out there, your face out there, so that people have heard of you even before they developed a deep relationship with you, you can give your reputation, your status, a bit of a head start. And you can do the same with ideas. So you're circulating an idea, you want to be influential, you want someone to say yes. I mean, I told this story a couple of years ago about my son, who a couple of years ago, this is my middle child, who's now 13, he's 11 at the time. He convinces my husband and I to get him a very expensive camera for Christmas. But the way he did it was he started his request in early October. And he started his request for his birthday. I want this camera for my birthday, along with a whole bunch of other stuff. And I was like, you are not getting that camera for your birthday. Are you crazy? It's expensive. You're going to break it. You're not responsible with anything. You've lost like 10 pairs of headphones. You've lost 3 school IDs. Like, no. But then he kept kind of asking for it, not in a like badgering way, but just like bringing it up again. And his birthday came and went and he didn't get it, but his birthday and Christmas are a month apart. And so now we're like, okay, we need to get him something for Christmas. He's still kind of talking about it. And eventually, my husband and I talk ourselves into it. We're like, well, we don't really have anything else to get him. And at least it's something that he could use to like do something productive with, which is probably better than all the other junk we would get him and he'd just break or throw away. And maybe we could figure it out and have him keep it safe and have some kind of restrictions around it. Da da da. And we got it for him. But what was his advantage in that? It was he started early and he could repeat, right? And your first reaction is, I don't like this, just like a new song on the radio. But then you start to come around. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
a familiar idea. You can become accustomed to it. And so I always tell him if he had come on December 20th and said, I want this camera for Christmas, he wouldn't have it. Not because he couldn't, but he would not have given us enough time psychologically to get our head around it. So that's what it is. And when the way we think about using it is to either get our own name out there by the behaviors we use, or to socialize our ideas that we want people to buy into a lot sooner so that they have time to become familiar with it. Because I always say if you go in to ask someone for something and you need them to say yes, it's like playing a song once on the radio and expecting it at the end to be their favorite song. It's like not impossible, but
Is
you're
this
not
like a
setting yourself
link,
up.
like why, like a LinkedIn post, like someone who has been posting stuff for a while potentially? Is this like why you would do it, to have that familiarity?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people who say they feel like they have a relationship with me from social media. Why? Because I just appear in their feed, just like you do. Like when you see someone who appears in your feed, LinkedIn, Insta, whatever it is, you start to feel like, oh, I know that person.
Mm-hmm.
They become familiar. I like them more
You're more
than a
receptive to their
person.
ideas and you like them more, is
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. So and you know who they are.
Yeah.
Um, so you think you know they are,
Yeah.
but really all you know is that they've just
Yeah.
scrolled past you 10 times. And that's become more familiar. I mean, my book agent, I don't know if there's specific data on this or this is her just hyperbole, but she said people need to hear about a book 4 times before they'll buy it. And that idea of, oh, it has to be repeated to you more than once or show. Like I just finished watching White Lotus. A lot of people did. But whenever you pick up a new show, for most people, it's like you hear everyone talking about it. You're like,
Mm-hmm.
this is now the 10th time. Like everyone in my family, they're all talking about Severance. Have you seen Severance? Or have you seen Shrinking? Or have you seen this? And and then eventually enough people say it that you think, oh, I'm going to do it. And that's what mere exposure is.
It's funny because in marketing, we talk about effective frequency and different categories have different effective frequencies. Like when I was at Weight Watchers, our effective frequency was like an 11. Like someone has to be touched 11 times because it's a highly considered category to take on a life change and potentially go on a diet. Trying a new Chobani yogurt has a much lower effective frequency. It's as simple as just grabbing it and putting it in my Walmart Plus cart. I can see the ad 2 times. It's a low stakes trial. So I think but I think when you talk about mere exposure, the one thing I just thought was just super, super applicable in your book is you mention even putting your name in the footnotes of slides. That was just something that Alison mentioned in the book, that a lot of times when you're presenting, do you just put, A Fragale in the bottom of a slide or something? So as the slides are moving past during a presentation, you're reinforcing your name and just getting them exposed to your personal brand, which is your name. I thought that was just a really interesting one. I think a lot of times people will present in meetings, maybe more junior folks. People used to actually put go to market plan Q4 2022. And sometimes you can put, Alison Fragale, Liat Sachs, Talia Solomon, just put it at the top just to, again, reinforce that you played a role in this. And I think have your name up there. I thought that just leveraging your name and that exposure was a really interesting tactic. So just wanted to share that with listeners.
Absolutely. I mean, I put my signature in my email, almost all my emails. And the way I think about it is like, if I'm emailing with you, you obviously don't need my signature because you know who I am. But one thing I think about is there any chance this email gets forwarded to anybody? Like, does it get
Yes.
forwarded to your organization? Someone need it? And that could end up in someone's inbox who has no idea who I am. And all of a sudden they've learned my picture's there, my website's there, there's a lot, and my book is there. So they can learn a lot about me through just that. I put my name in the title of all the files I save when I send them to clients.
Yes.
I'm doing speaking stuff because it's like for Gail is pretty like random. Like it might not mean something, but then once they've seen me, they're like, oh, okay, that's associated. I do have my now because I speak for a living. Now I have actually a footer that has like my little fancy
Yeah.
name signed
Yeah.
in it, logo.
That's
So
cute.
it's on every slide. But those are the kinds of things that are easy ways just to get name recognition. I think other things are things like saying yes and no to things based on who you'll meet. I think this is one where people aren't really good when they get asked to like do something that's voluntary, whether it's, can you volunteer for this thing at our kids school, or can you like join this kind of cross-functional time sucking task force at work or whatever it is. And sometimes you don't feel like you can say no without there being reputational consequence, all that stuff. But it's all to say that thinking about mere exposure as a criteria for doing those things, I think can be helpful, which is, who will now know who I am, even if I'm just, even if they just see me a little bit, who will I meet? And that could be of the beginning of building my status with that audience, is they now know I exist because now we're in this shared experience. And that may or may not be a sufficient reason, but I add it to my list of reasons that I will choose to say yes to something, is it'll bring me into contact with people that would be good for them to know I exist at the beginning. And again, it's step one in building a relationship with them.
I want to ask something about men versus women, right?
Yeah.
And in the workplace. And I know that, again, I have my entire career, I've been in like female dominated careers. Like I started off as a special education teacher, right? Then I was working clinically as a BCBA. I think 90% of our field is females. I do have exposure here and there to, I'm working with a male lawyer about trademarking behavior bitches or this and that, and they laugh or whatever it is. These different tools that you're giving, I feel like some of them could be more difficult for females. And I know that you mentioned this in your book. Can you talk to that a little bit, I guess, on the difference between males versus females? Maybe these things that you're telling us to be like, they might be seen as positive for a male, but negative for a female. This like powerful.
Yeah. So the reason I wrote this book for women was because we know that gender affects status. So the things that are in the book, like mere exposure, is not a phenomenon that has anything to do with gender. It's just, it's for all people. But gender does affect status, meaning when people's brains often ascribe more respect and value to the category of man than the category of woman. So if you walk in to a room, their brain, even their non-conscious brain, would say, I'm giving more respect to this person than this person, based on, social norms, bias, etc. But we have to contend with that. Meaning, if we sit back and we just say, hey, here I am, like I'm really credentialed, I'm doing good work, do what's not to respect. Sometimes that works, but sometimes we get surprised where all of a sudden we can tell that our audience doesn't really value us. So somebody mansplains you, or doesn't select you for something, or talks over you, or doesn't seem convinced by your idea, whatever it is. And then we realize, oh, wait a second, they don't really value me, they don't really respect me. And then we try to fix it. Being a woman is a potential risk factor for being underestimated and undervalued. Doesn't mean it's always going to happen. But if we recognize that, in the same way that you might have a health risk factor that says you are more predisposed to end up with this problem than your sibling or your neighbor. And you know what? That's not fair. But guess what? That's your life. It's not their life. And you got handed this thing that you didn't deserve. And now you have to figure out how to manage it. And so the reason I wrote this for women is that there are tools that are good for everybody. So let's say, certain types of diets where eating healthy is going to benefit all human beings, but it's going to be particularly helpful for people who have certain risks of disease that diet could really help. And so that's how I think about this, which is the kinds of advice I offer in the book are things I think will work for women based on evidence, the science, experience, et cetera. But they're good for everybody, but it's just uniquely helpful because women have a risk factor that men don't have.
I think that is like the trailer for this episode. Like, it's true. It is just like a risk factor that we have to contend with status. And that's why we have to lean in a little bit more and be more intentional about building it, because we're inherently back on our back foot. We have 2 more sections, and then I want to be mindful of Alison's time. Another thing that you reference in the book is, really considering defining your personal brand pillars to guide how you show up and how you make decisions. So I remember like making an acronym in my head while I was listening on the Peloton that yours was PEG. I think it was principled. Is it enthusiastic or entertaining and generous?
Entertaining and generous, yeah.
Okay, yes, so PEG. And this really resonated with me because as marketers, like we always have to define our brand pillars for a brand. And I spend so much time defining those for brands that I support. And that helps us with what products we innovate on, what creative our campaigns, we might lean into, how we might respond to something on social media. Will we be spicy or more demure, but again, all based on kind of how our brand persona is shaped. And then I was like, I don't know what my personal brand persona is. So, or my pillars are. Can you give us an example of, again, this principled, entertaining, and generous, and how you've used that to make a decision and how one might leverage those in their kind of like status building lives?
Yeah. So in the book, what I talk about is how this idea of having these brand pillars, which everyone's been introduced to before, could help you make decisions about status. Because there's a couple. Status is a resource. So I talk in the book about how do you build it, how do you get other people to respect you, but then it's a resource. Once you get them to respect you, what do you do with that? Do you
Mm-hmm.
want to, influence them? Do you want to move, navigate your own career, advance your whatever it is? But it's a resource. And a lot of times for women, I said we become status hoarders. We're so worried about having the respect of our audience. We feel like it's hard to earn. Once we earn it, we don't want to spend it. Meaning, I don't want to take any action if it risks that maybe you'll respect me less at the end, or you'll like me less, or you'll see me as less competent. So then we kind of just sit there afraid to do anything, which isn't productive. And so these idea of having the brand pillars, the way I talk about them in the book is they can be helpful to figure out what actions will you take in the present that might have a status consequence. So I'll give you some examples. One story I tell in the book is that there was a person that I essentially had to testify against. I'll just say it like this. Could testify against. And I was really concerned about whether I should speak up or not. Because if you speak up and you say negative things about somebody, obviously they're not going to like you. You're going to make enemies. You're going to burn your status in that. And maybe not just with them, but maybe with other people who supported them. And I'm like, do I say anything? Like, what do I not? I knew this was coming for a while and I was unsure what to do. And I called a friend of mine, and she said, to talk it through. And she said, Alison, I think no matter what you do, like both options, to speak up and to stay quiet, like, makes sense. But I've always thought of you as a really principled person. And I think it's one of your best qualities. And I appreciated that compliment. But not only that, when she said it, like, there was this instant recognition in my head that I realized that's so true. Every time I got really, really, really mad at work, it was always because I felt like somebody else was being treated poorly against the norms and rules, and that it was violating my sense of justice. And it would make me irate. So every time I lost my shit at work, it was never really about something that was happening to me. It was always about somebody else, I think, being put in a bad position that wasn't deserved or consistent. And I'm like, yeah, violating principle always gets me really, really mad. So what a second she said it, I thought that is really an identifying characteristic that I couldn't have labeled, but when she put it on me, it was felt right. And then given that label as a brand pillar, I'm like, what is the principled thing to do? It's to basically stand up and say, this was wrong. It shouldn't have happened. And I'm going to say that. And then it made the decision really feel really clear. Entertaining and generous are other elements. But to me, like, one place where I think about them a lot is social media, which you mentioned. Like, I use my social media really to cheer people on, to make people feel good, to make people laugh, and not everyone does that, and people have other brands that they put on social. But for example, like, when someone says something catty about something I've posted, or there's something mean about it, and there's a tendency to think like, should I respond to that or not? I always think, is like, that's not entertaining or generous to, like, attack it. I'm just letting it go. And that doesn't mean it's the right answer, but it means that my brand pillars give
Yes.
me some clarity as to what to do when I'm sitting in front of this thing and I'm like, do I respond? Do I not respond? And I think it's neither entertaining nor generous to respond. So, like, let it go.
I
That's
love
where I
that.
think the way I use those pillars is, how do you use them in the present when you have a decision to make that might burn you a little bit of your reputation? The pillars can be helpful.
I love that.
Yeah, I don't think there's right answers here on these things, and that's why we struggle with them. Like, do I, don't I? Because we're worried about the reputational consequences, but also being authentic to what we care about and what we believe in. I think the pillars are one I talk about, but the other one I talk about too is your contributions and your accomplishments. And I think this can be another guiding force for thinking about, do you respond or not? So as an example, if I see my contributions as being a women's advocate, if I'm more likely to respond to something that I see saying something negative or derogatory about women, because that's central to my identity. Whereas if I see somebody talking about a political statement about Republicans versus Democrats that I don't agree with, I'm very unlikely to, actually zero chance that I'll wade into that. because that's not the mark that I want to make on the world. At no point do I hope someone raises a glass to me and talks about like my political acumen or my
Mm-hmm.
political commentary. It's not my space. So I do not do it. But for women, I will say things because that is my space. So I think that's another
That's a
thing to
great.
think about is
That's great
what do I
advice.
want to look back and say that I've achieved and who I am?
And I think something you're passionate about in the space is the fair treatment and fair access for all to ABA and like the benefits that it can provide. So if it ever is starting to err in that territory, which it seems like it has sometimes where people are being discriminated against and not being given the best service, that's when you might speak up on any level. I think that's a great filter.
Great advice.
This is not my advice, but there's a woman, well-known venture capitalist by the name of Heidi Roizen, and I have admired her from afar for a long time. And I recently got to sit on a panel with her at Stanford, and she said something about online, which is basically we were in this talking about the same thing, which is building your status. And now status is built through your online presence as well.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to think about that, right? But how whether people respect you or not is partly about how you show up online. And what she said, which I thought was smart, is only post online that which you are willing to be hated for. And she gave some examples of things she won't say, but things she really stands for. And she says, if you want to hate me because I believe this is central to who I am. And if someone decides they're not going to work with me because of that, fine, go away, because that is really critical and central to my identity. But like, I'm not going to go off being like, taking some stance on like whether the keto diet is the best diet because I'm not losing work because of people like my
Oh, yeah.
preferences. You know what I mean? So she was just saying, like, thinking about it that way, and I think it's a smart way to think about it.
No, that makes a lot of sense.
I like that filter.
I like that a lot.
My last thing that I just wanted to ask about was the opposite of a likable badass. I was trying to think about what it would be. I was thinking like probably an unlikable bitch. And we were on behavior bitches, so I don't know if bitch is necessarily derogatory.
Depends
but
what context you use bitches. Here we're using it like why men love bitches. That book, you know?
In the
Empowering.
right, empowering. But how might someone know if they're an unlikable bitch? Should you have like someone who's your truth teller? Are unlikable bitches
What are
redeemable?
indicators that would be
Yeah.
like, maybe I am that?
Yeah. What are common behaviors of that person?
Well, a couple things. It's all perception, right? So you
Right.
could be doing nothing that
Fair.
is
Fair.
necessarily puts you in that category, and people could see you that way. The warm side is you're really oriented toward others. The cold side is going to be things that detract from other people's lives. So being quarrelsome, difficult, selfish, mean, that kind of stuff is going to be on the cold side. And then on the submissive side is going to be, timid, lacking confidence, meek, the unsure, those kind of things. So you can end up in either of those spaces. The feedback comes from your environment. Yes, people don't like to give negative feedback. So sometimes people will be talking to other people about us and our reputation before it gets back to us. But eventually it does make its way to you. Every single woman has said to me, oh, yeah. I've heard that I'm too aggressive, or, I'm not friendly enough, or I don't smile enough, or I'm not confident enough. That feedback has made its way back to people, right? Whether it's in hallway conversation or formal reviews, people do it. So what I would say is you want to speed it up. And I always say to people, if you don't want people to talk about you, say bad things about you behind your back, make it easy for them to say bad things about you to your face. You want to be the one who's the first to know if someone says that didn't land right with me. And the first thing they'll do is run to you and tell you rather than run and tell everybody
love
else.
that.
Because then they're killing your status outside of the room and you don't even know it.
Yes.
So you want them to come to you. So I would say, generally speaking, once it becomes a big enough thing, people start to get the feedback. They start to hear it firsthand, secondhand, third hand, or they can sense it in a meeting. You're talking to somebody and they're kind of condescending to you, or they're short with you, or whatever it is. And you think, they're not really seeing me as the warm, assertive person that I am. But the key to that is to speed up the process through which you can get people to tell you those things.
I love
And
that.
being really curious, and even when someone says something that's really hurtful to hear, hard to hear, to try to receive it with gratitude that they told it to you, and to encourage people to do that again can be really helpful for figuring out that you have a blind spot that other people don't get. And I mean, I can give you an example of something. Like, women tell me all the time, they get feedback that they're not confident enough, they don't have enough executive presence, this kind of stuff. And they think that's just bias. And I said, it totally could be bias. I don't know. But it also could be there are cues you're giving off that you don't know you're giving off that are contributing to it. And I'll give you an example for myself. I knew I had a tendency to self-deprecate, to cut myself down. I'm hilariously funny. Self-deprecating can be a form of humor. I would do it. I didn't want to come across as immodest. I wanted to be seen as humble, etc. So I knew I had a tendency to do it, but I also knew it wasn't a great idea. So I thought I had it a bit in check. Till I wrote the first draft of Likeable Badass, sent the book to the editor, who, despite buying the book and therefore believing in the project, did not know me at all. We had only met one time. And her biggest piece of feedback when it came back was, "Oh my God, Allison, look at how much you're cutting yourself down in this writing. These are not your high school besties that are reading this book. People are buying a book to read it from an expert. You cannot be diminishing your own expertise. These people don't know the difference because they don't know you. So you cut it out." She even nixed my dedication page, which I joke. I'm like, isn't that the one page that is beyond editing that I could say whatever I wanted? Like it's my moment to
That's
just
wild.
send my love into the universe and you can't say it. She's like, your dedication is self-deprecating, which it was.
Like,
And
thanks,
so, but here's
family, for dealing with me. I know I'm a lot. Like, things like that.
yes, it was basically like to everyone who knew me when I was not a likable badass, including like everyone who knew me in high school, anyone who's met me before 3 cups of coffee. It like went on and
Yeah.
on. It's like, no, none of that. Nix it. So now my dedication is really boring. It just says to my family. Because I was scared. I was like, there's nothing I can do that's not going to cut myself down. But my point is, I had a blind spot, even though I speak about this stuff for a living. If I had not had that experience, imagine all those cuts that I did to myself were not in writing, but they were like in conversation after conversation, meeting after meeting. And then someone said, "Alice, she just doesn't really strike me as having like the presence or the capability." And I would have been like, that is such bias. And I would have had no idea that there I was cutting myself down, putting that story in their head that I wasn't good at this and I wasn't good at that. When she did it and pointed it out so articulately, and it was on writing, there was no denying it. I could see
Right,
it.
right.
So my point is that sometimes when we hear these things and we don't know what they're about, someone could be reading into something or seeing something that we're doing, but they're not good at labeling it. And we have no memory that we've done it. And so we can't figure it out. So I always tell people, like, if you get that kind of feedback, as hurtful as it is, it might be bias. But if you can get a little curious about it and dig, you might find that there's something super simple that you're doing that is creating an impression, and it would be super simple for you to stop doing it and get a lot more credit if you just knew what it was.
I love that.
That's amazing. For anyone studying, I would say how we could tie this in would be being able to tact, right? Tact we use as a term for labeling something. To actually be able, once we're able to tact something, then it's something we could actually work on and create as a behavioral target. And with that, also, when Allison was saying, she couldn't argue it when it was actually in her physical writing. And that's what we talk about as one of our measurement systems as a permanent product. So when we actually physically have something which actually leaves an impact on the environment, whether it's, a bite mark because someone bit you, or it's your actual physical writing showing that you did do this, right? That is a great way to get that feedback on that because there's no going back. You have the permanent product there that you could look at.
Can I tell you how much I love this right now? Because I always have to be the person translating for other people, just like speaking psychology, but I don't ever get anyone to translate me. So this is amazing.
This is what I do. My sister's like, okay, so what terms are we going to do here? We're going to do preference assessment over here. I was like, don't worry, dude. This is like literally what I do. I sit in the podcast and like think of the terms.
I know. I was giving you the
Like
translation.
literally, I didn't even want to tell you. You used the word preference assessment a little wrong in the beginning, but I was
so
like,
I used it
just
wrong
in
the
case
beginning.
anyone's listening, a preference assessment. She just used the word like, which is true. Preferences are things that you like. But because we are helping people study for the exam, I just got to clarify this real quick. A preference assessment is when you're going to be working with someone and you're like, hey, by the way, like, what kind of things do you like? They're like, oh, I like leaving work early. I like the good parking spot. I like when you bring Starbucks to the office. But then we do a preference assessment to be like, okay, what might this person work for? And then when we get to a reinforcer assessment, is being like, okay, yeah, I like Starbucks, but not enough to stay at work till 10 p.m. That's when we are like, is it good enough to make someone engage in a behavior again? Right.
Okay.
So just so you know, my sister is really smart at a lot of things, but she has to work on her terminology a little bit.
Yeah, I've only heard you.
She's not a BCBA.
I'm not a BCBA. Even though we do joke that I should take the exam for being
think
around
you
you so
would.
much, and like I might be able to pass. We are giving. You don't know this, but I'm letting this podcast episode be sponsored by Chili's Bar and Grill. Thanks to George Felix for the intro to Alison. You were the catalyst for me reading the book, us having this conversation, making my dreams come true to talk to the original Likeable Badass. And in order to really give you the shout out that you deserve, Chili's, I want all of our listeners to know that they are currently promoting the 3 for Me special. For just $10.99, you can have refills on sodas, chips and dip, and 1 entree. That's better than any fast food you can get out there. So go into Chili's and see what's up. Thanks to George Felix, and thank you to Alison for being here. Thanks to Sis for letting me take over, take the reins.
Of course.
Baby back ribs.
Baby back ribs, yes.
Alison, I just want to thank you so much for coming on. Just the advice I got from you today, I like wrote down the things on the side here is what I'm going to take as my tidbits. And it was like so targeted exactly, even though I didn't give you the exact situation, I know exactly what I'm going to do. So that number one. So thank you for coming on. I want everyone to know where they could find you. And also, I just want to tell you before you say this, everyone, this book is so digestible. This is like coming to one of my classes, breaking down the Cooper book on all ABA terms. This book is so easy to read. It has such amazing examples that you could apply on the spot. So I recommend everyone, before you find out where to find Alison, head over to Amazon and get Likeable Badass in your hand. It also is like, aside from that, even after you read it, what an amazing thing to have on your bookshelf. It just like looks cool too, like Likeable Badass. Alison, where can everyone find you?
The easiest thing to do, I'm in 3 places I think can be useful to people. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram, and I have a free newsletter called The Upper Hand. Those 3 places. If you want a one-stop shop to click buttons to find those, my website has that. So AlisonFragale.com, and you can read about the book. You can order the book from there. You can click to do my newsletter and social. And then I've done a lot of media stuff. This one being, the absolute highlight of all of them. When Talia reached out, I said, you had me at behavior bitches. I was like, I don't know what you do, but I'm in. Whatever this is definitely my people. But all my like prior podcasts and things I've written and stuff like that, it's all on there. So that's a good spot.
So the website's the one-stop shop. I like that.
The one-stop
put that
shop.
in the
AlisonFragale.com.
Yes.
Yeah. Amazing. I also, by the way, you told me after our first meeting, you were like, with all these different things you're doing, you really need your name website. So I do have liatsachs.com now. Thank you for that.
She's been a
good. You got to integrate. You're the brand, girl. You got to do it.
You said it that day, and I like went over to Julia. I was like, Julia, we must do this before this next conference. So I did it. So thank you.
Yeah. Did you put content up there yet?
We have content up there, all the different places you can find me. It's up there.
Nice.
I need to actually put on like a monthly to like make sure like the newest like things I've done are up there too. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just like
or have
remembering.
it pull in your feed so it at least shows some fresh content.
Absolutely. But thanks guys for coming. You know where you can find us. You can find us on behaviorbitches.com, on Instagram at Behavior Bitches Podcast, Facebook at Behavior Bitches Podcast, TikTok, Behavior Bitches Podcast, YouTube, Behavior Bitches Podcast. Everyone go and subscribe on YouTube since we're doing this visual and I have to do my makeup every time. So make it worth it for me. And that's all we have for you today. As always, love ya.
Mean it.
It's Behavior Bitches.